The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, and welcome to our discussion on the transaction search window in Design Manager. My name is Brad, and I'll be hosting the discussion today. If you have questions during the webinar, feel free to enter them into the questions pane under GoToWebinar panel. If the question is outside of the scope of today's discussion, please email them to support@designmanager.com. And lastly, if you miss a portion of the webinar or want to review any of our past discussions, go to our YouTube channel at Design Manager Inc., Design Manager INC. And here you can see a complete listing of all sorts of topics, such as our quick start videos, short helpful tutorials, and our comprehensive webinar, which we categorize into our project management and accounting courses, along with all of our other weekly webinars as well. Now today we'll be discussing the transaction search window, which I think is an invaluable tool in retrieving information pertaining to fiscal or accounting transactions. So let's get started. The transaction search window is accessed from your Accounting tab, under your General Ledger frame, and click the Transaction Search button. Essentially, the transaction search window allows us to input a wide variety of criteria and immediately retrieve all of the accounting transactions that satisfy that criteria. And let's review those right now. So you can see we have options for entering in a particular client or project, particular vendor, an account number, a fiscal month range, the type of the transaction, and we have entries for all purchases or broken out to vendor deposits, operating expenses, project and inventory vendor invoices, checks or other disbursements or other cash payments, all of our cash receipts or broken out to miscellaneous cash receipts, retainers, deposits on proposals, payments on invoices, client invoices themselves, and invoice adjustments, and even journal entries. Then we can enter in a particular transaction number. If you know that and want to research it, you can enter it in right there. Very handy, the transaction amount. If you know the particular amount of the transaction, you can input it and see which accounting transactions satisfy that amount. Proposal and purchase order numbers, and then a few very important dates. The entry date, that's the date that the user input on the transaction when they were entering it into Design Manager. Now the key date is the date that it was physically processed when the user sat down and actually entered that information into Design Manager. Now you don't control that date at all. Design Manager does that automatically for you behind the scenes. Check number, your check number to a vendor or a client's check number to you, and even the vendor invoice number. Now let's do a quick example to see some of the overall functionality of the window. So I'll go ahead and put in our Carter client, click the Find button, and we can see every single transaction that pertains to the Carters is now listed in our transaction search grid. And let's quickly look at some of the columns that are available for us on the grid itself. First, of course, is the transaction search number, the transaction number. Next to that is the revision number. Certain accounting transactions in Design Manager can be edited or revised, and the revision number is uniquely generated for each time that those transactions are edited. The type of the transaction, a client retainer or a deposit, a client invoice, vendor invoice, check, etc. The date, the entry date, that's the date the user actually typed in when inputting the transaction. The fiscal month, the account number and name, whether or not the transaction debited or credited the account. Remember, every single transaction has at least two parts, one that's crediting an account and one that's debiting an account. It could have more, but it always has at least two. The optional transaction description, a revision description. For those editable transactions, Design Manager actually creates a set of revision descriptions automatically for you behind the scenes. The project code, client code, purchase order number, and proposal number. Check number for the client's check number for you, your check number for vendors, the vendor code, vendor invoice number. There's that key date. That's the exact moment in time that the transaction was processed. Again, Design Manager does that automatically for you. Due dates, miscellaneous cash receipt names. Obviously, there wouldn't be there one for the carders, nor would there be a journal entry number. Payment transaction reference number. If a payment is recorded against an invoice, that would be the invoice number itself. So the payment has a transaction number, and we also record what it's at, the transaction number of what it's paying. That will be under the payment transaction reference. And keyed by user. What was the account or user that actually entered the transaction into Design Manager? So a wealth of information is available for us on our transaction search window. Let's take a look down. There's a couple of informative pieces on this window. First, the transaction search window shows voided transactions that are not easily seen in other areas of the software. Let's narrow our results a bit more to demonstrate. So I'm going to drop my type list down to cash receipts and even put a transaction number in. Click find, and now I'm narrowing my scope down. Now notice here, we have a series of revisions. We made some edits to the deposit slip number up at one point, and then our second revision was an actual voided the entire receipt itself. Now, if I go to the cash receipt window, cash receipts, go to the existing tab, sort by reference number, notice I don't see a transaction 10,001, not available in the cash receipt window. If I look at another window, let's go to the project status, perhaps, for the Carter's Brigantine Beach Home. Go to our deposits and retainers tab. I don't see a deposit listed here for transaction 10,001 either. Only on our transaction search window can we find that transaction. Okay, very handy tool there, particularly if you're trying to find information that you can't see elsewhere in the software. Let's go back to our Carter example. Now, right from our window, we have some additional functionality. Let's say we have a payment on an invoice that we're located on our transaction search window. And notice that, oh, we input the date incorrectly. Of course, I could go to my cash receipt window, make my changes, but right from the transaction search window, I can just click the Go To button, which is going to position me immediately to that cash receipt window with the particular entry already highlighted for us, as we can see. And then I could even make my changes as necessary. Let's make that the 25th. And there we go. Now notice, if we put in our transaction number of that payment, we now have a revision as well. So just like that, Design Manager is recording that revision description for me, and I can see that information only on the transaction search window and a few other areas as well. I could then print out a copy. Perhaps the principal or the owner or an accountant wanted a little bit more information on why that transaction was edited. I can use the print button and easily generate a report of all of the transactions listed on the transaction search window. And it even includes the revisions and the revision descriptions. Very handy. Even more powerful, I could then export this entire grid by clicking the export button and make an Excel copy of all of the columns as well, which I have listed right here. And we can see every column is listed for us. So I can then do extra analysis in Excel, or perhaps the accountant just wants it in that format. Very easily, click of a button, I can get the entire set of transactions that satisfy my current criteria, and boom, shoot it right to Excel. Okay, what other examples or what other uses do we have for our transaction search window? Check numbers come up all the time. I may have a check number for a client that I'm trying to track down. Did I actually enter it? So if I have the client's check number, they're saying they gave it to us. I can pop that into the check number. There we go. Oh, indeed, the Carter certainly did give us that check for a deposit on proposal 1 for that the Carter's particular project. Just like that, we can find it. Flip it around, vendors as well. Let's say I'm trying to find a particular, I have check, I don't know, 10,003 for a particular vendor. Yes, I could go to my accounting and go to my checkbook, search back in time, and check 10,003. Okay, there it is. It was America's Mattress, etc. But if I know the check number, I can put it into my transaction search window, and there we go. I find it immediately, and again, use the go-to, and I can jump right there. Much more efficient way to navigate throughout the entire program using that transaction search. Also handy, the check number. If you ever have a situation where design managers alerting you that a particular check number has already been used or used for a different vendor, we can use the transaction search window to review it. For example, if we tried to use check 10,003 against, let's say, ABC Computer Supply, if I went and used that number, let's grab today's date, I'm immediately alerted that check number 10,003 was already used for a different supplier. So if I ever have this informative message come up alerting me to that fact, just take the check number, go right to your transaction search window, put it in, and you can find the transaction that is preventing you from using that check number repeatedly. The search window can also be an analytic tool. Maybe I want to see all of the purchases for the Carters and for a particular vendor, America's Mattress. Okay. Put the Carters in again, put America's Mattress, and maybe I want to just focus on vendor invoices. And there they are. Only one, but I immediately found it. Let's say the accountant wants a list of all sales tax recorded for the Carter's Pennington home. We could do that too. I could put in that particular project code, Carter's Pennington home. And then for my account, I'll put in sales tax. Click find, and there they are. And again, I could very easily just print that out and provide it to the accountant. Or, if the accountant desires, export it right into Excel as well. And another common occurrence. What if I want to find transactions that I may have dated in a prior month or prior year, but I physically entered them in another? So let's say I want to track down any transaction that I dated in 2018, but I physically entered in 2019. So my entry date, I can leave the first one blank, and I could use the ending date of 12/31/18. That's basically everything through the end of last year. But my key date would be from January 1st of 19 through today. Click find, and there we go. And I could see I did indeed input a client retainer. I dated it back on the end of the year. My description even says should be in prior year, but that was actually done just a few days ago. This is very important as transactions that are affecting prior months that were entered in recently can hinder bank reconciliations, or even with more consequences, you could be affecting prior years that you've already paid income taxes on. So using the transaction search window to see when transactions were entered can be very handy. And the combination of the entry date and key date allows you to do so. Another handy function is on any of your 5 recommended monthly reports, which are the aged accounts receivable, aged accounts payable, work in process, Open vendor deposit and open client deposit reports may have an amount listed in their other transactions figure. Now, if you're not familiar with those 5 reports, be sure to check out another one of our webinars called the 5 Monthly Reports to Review, as those are important, if not critical, reports to be monitoring on a timely basis to ensure good financial health. But if there are such circumstances where you're reviewing those reports and there's an additional figure at the bottom, which we call other transactions, the transaction search window can help you diagnose those. Let's look at one of the examples that I said, the aged accounts payable report. We can see the aged accounts payable report is listing all of the bills, invoices, operating expenses, etc. that I've entered, but not yet remitted payment for. Along the bottom, however, I see in other transactions affecting the AP account of $42.15, minus, quite honestly. So another use of the transaction search window is to find those transactions. So I could go back to our transaction search window. I want to focus on the accounts payable account, as that's the report that coincides with the aged accounts payable report. And I can even put in the transaction amount. Let's put in $42.50. There's no need to put in the minus. Design Manager will find it either way. Click Find, and we can see there's a transaction that affects our accounts payable account and has that amount. Now, what we see here is this is a single transaction, 10,046, that both debits and credits the same account. That's a red flag right there. So if we use our Go To button, it's going to take me to my Vendor Invoices Window Existing tab, positioned right to our account. Since I haven't paid it yet, I can edit and see what may have occurred. My account distribution, I use my accounts payable account. That's not almost never would that be the case. The account distribution, you're basically telling Design Manager, what am I paying for? I'm not paying accounts payable. This appears to be client lunch, so it's probably some meals and entertainment expense account. Click OK. OK again to save my change. Now, hit Find again. I'm going to see a revision, that's for sure, because I'm pulling it out of the accounts payable account. And now, if we look at our report, successfully removed that amount. So using the transaction search window can really help you drill down on some information on your other reports, particularly those other transactions amounts, if they ever arise. And with that, that brings us to the end of our discussion of the powerful transaction search window today. And this is where we discussed finding particular accounting transactions with the transaction search window. I tried to review many common uses, including searching for particular checks or other transactions, using the window for analysis, researching edited or voided transactions, and many others. But be sure to explore the window yourself, as you may uncover uses that even some of our experts haven't thought of. And with that, I thank you for joining our webinar today, and I hope you join another one of our free discussions in the future real soon. Take care.